Yes, no, maybe. I don't know. Can you repeat the question? You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now, and you're not so big. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now. You're not the boss of me now, and you're not so big. Life is unfair.
Hey everybody, Alex the Critic here, and have you ever had a cartoon that, when it first premiered, you liked well enough, but then you watched a certain episode of it that made you see the show in a totally new light, to the point where it instantly became one of your favorites? I myself can only remember it happening once. The cartoon in question was Regular Show, and the episode that made me a lifelong fan of it was the Season 3 entry Busted Cart. I had been a fan of Regular Show when it first arrived on the animation scene, and kept up with the show on a semi-regular basis, but it wasn't until I saw Busted Cart that it skyrocketed into being one of my favorite cartoons of all time. And the specific moment that won me over was a monologue from a character who, up until that point, I had seen as little more than a one-dimensional antagonist. But in order to explain what makes this monologue so impactful, I have to cover the events preceding it. And before I can do that, I need to give y'all a crash course on what this show is. Regular Show is a surrealist slice-of-life comedy centered around the workplace antics of two best friends, a blue jay named Mordecai and a raccoon named Rigby. Created by J.G. Quintel, the show was a product of Cartoon Network's Cartoonstitute, a short-lived program that showcased short cartoons made by numerous young animators with little to no studio interference. It premiered on September 6, 2010, and ran for 8 seasons, ending its run on January 16, 2017. Regular Show, alongside other early 2010s cartoons like Adventure Time and The Amazing World of Gumball, has been hailed as bringing forth a second renaissance of sorts for Cartoon Network, which had been spiraling into mediocrity as a channel after a failed attempt to introduce live-action programming to its viewers. And today, I'm going to delve into one of the reasons why it's earned that reputation. Let's begin. The episode opens on a shot of a hill that stands within the park that Mordecai and Rigby work at. Standing atop the hill are our two stalwart protagonists, who have set up an obstacle course for them to drive the park's golf cart through in a pastime they refer to as...
Extreme Carton.
Extreme Carton?
Whoa!
What this extreme karting entails is using the bridge as a makeshift ramp, grinding on an equally makeshift steel beam, swerving around traffic cones, and donutting their way in and out of a giant hole they dug in the ground. Amazingly, they're able to accomplish all of these things and come out relatively unscathed. They hop out of the cart to congratulate themselves on what seems to be a job well done, only for the cart to start rolling down a hill that they'd just stopped in front of. As they haplessly watch their golf cart roll away, we cut to the park grounds, where their boss, a gumball machine named Benson, is in the middle of receiving a glowing evaluation from his boss, a lollipop named Mallard. Whatever goodwill Benson has built up with the park owner humorously goes out the window as we see the golf cart and its drivers speed past them before the former crashes straight into a tree. Benson starts to scold Mordecai and Rigby, but gets cut off by Mallard, who demands to see him in his office. In the next scene, we see Mallard chew Benson out for his negligence, with a worried Mordecai and Rigby listening in on them. Benson assures his boss that the cart still has a valid warranty on it, which leads to the following exchange.
This expires tomorrow afternoon.
But the dealership's too far away. I'll have to drive all day and night.
Sounds like a personal problem. Get that cart fixed or you're fired.
Why the hell did Benson buy a golf cart that's so far away from the park? Are you really telling me that the metropolitan city that this park seems to be located in doesn't have a single dealership that offers specialized vehicles like golf carts? Well, anyways, a pissed Benson leaves the house with Mordecai and Rigby following him. They apologize for their screw-up and offer to help him take care of the cart, but Benson orders them to stay at the park. This then leads to a rather hilarious exchange.
But that drive is way too long for one person to handle.
I'll take my chances.
I need to find some excuses to play that clip in my future videos. Moving along, we cut to the highway, where we see Benson drive his way through deadlocked traffic, bad weather, and mundane desert scenery. That last one's a bitch to put up with, let me tell ya. Right after filling up his tank with some gas, he remarks on how well things are going for him, only to make a horrifying discovery.
As long as you don't stop, you can get to the dealership with time to spare. And then, as soon as you get back to the park, you can fire Mordecai and Rigby!
Okay, how in the hell did Benson go that entire drive without noticing that Mordecai and Rigby were in the car with him? That's a long time to go without moving around or saying anything. There's no way the two of them were able to stay silent long enough to avoid being caught before now, especially not with how much of a whiny chatterbox Rigby is. Well, anyways, Benson screeches his truck to a halt and gets out to scold his employees for coming along with him, where we get the funniest exchange in the entire episode.
I can't believe this! I told you idiots not to come! Does the word not process into your thick skulls?
Of course not. Wait,
Classic.
Look, Benson, we just wanted to help you make it across the country.
And, how exactly were you two helping him? Because all we saw you doing during that montage from earlier was hide in the back seat. But I digress. Benson realizes that he doesn't have the time to go take Mordecai and Rigby back to the park, so he allows them to accompany him for the rest of the trip, but only if they do everything he tells them to do. This goes about as well as you'd expect.
Water! Open! Mouth!
Alright, to be fair, that one's not Mordecai and Rigby's fault. It's Benson's for not noticing that there was a giant cement block lying on the ground and driving around it. This next part's definitely Rigby's fault, though.
Napkins! No napkins! No napkins!
Like, seriously, how hard is it to open a small package of paper napkins? It's not made of steel or saran wrap or anything. Well, anyways, Benson, swerving from being blindfolded by napkins, gets him pulled over by a police officer, who makes him pass a DUI test before allowing him back behind the wheel. Can I just point out for a moment how wild it is that this children's cartoon depicts one of its main characters undergoing a DUI test? Like, holy shit, this show was a lot more risque than I remember it being. Anyways, after finally getting back on the road, Mordecai and Rigby try to apologize for everything that's just happened, but Benson shuts them down and demands that they stay quiet for the rest of the trip. A few seconds of tense silence later, Rigby asks a tough question, which prompts the first real moment of character development in the episode.
Benson, why do you hate us so much?
I don't hate you guys. I just hate some of the things you do. Okay, I really hate some of the things you do. I know you don't mean them, but I'm your boss, and it's my job to push you to do better.
Is that why Maylard yells at you?
You guys don't know how easy you have it. Let's just say his yelling is way worse than mine.
But is it worse than his face?
His face.
This scene right here was when I realized I was watching a special episode of Regular Show, because it humanizes Benson by revealing that the reason he antagonizes Mordecai and Rigby as much as he does isn't because he's an overbearing asshole who intrinsically despises them and gets on their ass just for the sake of it. It's because he just wants them to do their damn jobs so that they learn some basic responsibility. And also so that they don't get fired like he's about to be. Granted, I'm not sure how realistic it is for the mood in the car to change so quickly despite how angrily Benson just scolded his employees, but still, this is a great scene. It's not the best scene in the episode, however. That comes later. Let's move through the next few minutes so that I can gush about it. After a short montage of the boys dancing to some pretty boring electro-pop music, we cut to nighttime, where a tired Benson is having trouble staying awake. Mordecai suggests taking over the wheel for him, an offer which Benson initially dismisses. Once Rigby points out how unsafe it is to drive while being drowsy, however, Benson relents and pulls the car over. He warns Mordecai and Rigby to only let him sleep for 2 hours, and Mordecai assures him that they can be trusted. Once Mordecai gets behind the wheel, he asks Rigby to check their map to see where they are. After the two of them laugh about the unfortunate name of the town they're passing, Rigby points out that they've almost made it to the dealership. Just then, however, something interesting catches Mordecai's attention, a billboard advertising an arcade that's on the next exit.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
Video game pit stop!
Well, considering that it's the dead of night, I highly doubt that this place is going to be open, so I think you're just gonna have to keep driving.
Alright, let's do this, but only for 30 minutes. Benson's job is on the line.
Right.
Are you kidding me? This arcade is still open, even though it's midnight and it's located in the middle of nowhere? Talk about a contrived plot point. I'd be more willing to believe that this place was still open if it was like a 24/7 business, or if it was a convenience store or rest stop that just happened to have this big ass arcade inside it. But this? Nah, even for Regular Show, this shit makes no sense. I get that we need one last screw up from Mordecai and Rigby in order for the narrative payoff of the episode to be satisfying, but the writers just chose the laziest way to add one. Anyways, despite telling themselves that they'll only be at the arcade for a few minutes, they wind up staying there for the entire night. When Benson finally wakes up, he takes a look at his surroundings and becomes enraged at the state of his situation. Barging into the arcade, he searches for Mordecai and Rigby and finds them staring and laughing at a game over screen, which they appear to have been doing for hours. Whatever floats your boat, I guess. Benson then drags the two of them outside, where we finally get the monologue that forever changed my perspective of Regular Show.
Turn it off!
Ugh, how long were we in there?
Hours! You were in there for hours! Now we're never gonna make it to the dealership in time! It closes in 30 minutes!
We're sorry. We didn't know it was daytime. There aren't any windows in the arcade.
Excuses! Excuses! How am I supposed to trust you when all you give me are excuses? When are you two gonna learn that your actions have consequences? Consequences that affect other people, like me! Don't you two understand? I'm about to lose my job! You may not care about keeping your jobs, but I care about keeping mine. Because if I lose my job, I have nothing. Do you hear me? I have nothing! Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to take my last bathroom break as an employed man.
So, The 13-year-old me that first watched this episode had been exposed to his fair share of cruel, overbearing bosses in the fictional media he consumed. Characters like Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants, J. Jonah Jameson from The Amazing Spider-Man, Truffles from Chowder, and so on. The young me had also watched his fair share of absurdist comedies, which Regular Show definitely counts as. So when this particular Cartoon Network show came out and presented me with all of the writing tropes that I was more than familiar with, I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was anything special. Just a decently written slacker comedy. This episode, and this moment in particular, however, single-handedly convinced me that there was more to this series than I thought, and Regular Show went from a cartoon that I watched whenever it happened to air to a cartoon that I religiously kept up with. But enough pseudo-intellectual philosophizing. Let's break down exactly why this scene is so good. Firstly, Benson's outburst here is, for the most part, properly set up and justified. Despite expressing a desire to help Benson fix a problem that they created multiple times throughout the episode, Mordecai and Rigby have done nothing but piss Benson's chances at keeping his job away. Even after directly telling the man that he could trust them, they let their own desires get in the way, and now Benson has to pay the consequences for it, even though he's a far better worker than the two of them will ever be. Secondly, the main villain of this episode isn't some monster or god like it usually is. It's life. Benson's employment isn't being threatened by a magical keyboard that can grant any wish you have, or a practitioner of some deadly martial art. It's being threatened by his placing his trust in two incompetent nincompoops who care more about playing video games than they do about the well-being of those around them. And that's what made Regular Show as a cartoon so special. It wasn't just about watching two likable idiot slackers going on absurd adventures together. It was also about them and their co-workers navigating their way through the endlessly complicated mess that is real life. Thirdly, this scene humanized Benson in a way that hadn't yet been done. We'd seen a calmer, more mature side to this grouchy gumball machine in earlier episodes, especially in the first half of the first season, but for the most part, he was portrayed as your typical authoritarian hardass, and we never really knew why he was like that. Here though, it's laid out crystal clear. The reason why Benson is such a killjoy is because his job is the only thing in his life that brings him a modicum of joy and pride. This scene added a new layer of depth to Benson's character and permanently changed his dynamic with the rest of the cast. From this point forward, we as the audience would see him less as a petty, overbearing tyrant and more as a stern, but patient and understanding leader who's every bit as goofy and likable as the other park workers. Last but not least, what really makes this scene hit the way it does is the fantastic voice acting on display here by Sam Marin, the man who plays Benson. He gives an Emmy-tier performance, with his voice cracking and shaking in ways that you would expect it to if you were in the middle of an emotional breakdown. His acting here makes it hard for me to watch this scene without welling up, which is particularly impressive when you consider that the animation isn't really doing justice to the emotions he's conveying. Sure, we see the gumballs inside his head turn red like they usually do when he's upset, as well as tears run down his cheeks in certain shots, but the flat way this scene is shot kind of undercuts how intense it's supposed to be. Even Mordecai and Rigby only look mildly upset at what Benson's saying when the camera cuts back to them, which just goes to show that animation was always the show's weak point. But hey, that just speaks to Sam Marin's immense talent, as well as the talent of the writers. You don't need great animation to tell a great story. Now, I'm heavily tempted to just end the video here, but if there's anything you guys know about me, it's that I like to cover everything about the cartoon episodes I review, and there's still 4 minutes left of this one. So how about we breeze through the rest of it to see how it ends? After Benson exits the bathroom, he finds that Mordecai and Rigby have run off with the truck, which sends him into a rage. He runs over to a nearby biker and asks him if he's seen them, to which the biker replies in the funniest voice ever.
Oh, yeah! They're taking the shortcut out to Highway 13 to the car dealership.
What?
Most dangerous highway in the country.
Of course, Benson's not about to let this slide, so he buys the man's bike off of him and chases after the two, prompting me to wonder both how he can afford to do this and how he knows how to ride a motorcycle. I guess when you're a park manager whose veins are coursing with adrenaline, you can do just about anything. Anyways, Benson catches up with his two employees just after they make the turn onto Highway 13 and jumps onto the back of his truck. He chastises them for attempting to drive through the most dangerous highway in the country, but Mordecai tells him that it's the only way to make it to the dealership in time. Benson brushes him off both literally and figuratively, telling the two of them that he's turning the truck around. Unfortunately, the three of them cross a bridge that just so happens to collapse right afterwards, cutting them off from the regular highway. Soon afterwards, the very ground itself begins to sink, as it wouldn't be an episode of regular show without surreal horrors being foisted onto our main characters, and Benson drives as fast as he can to outrun it. He immediately comes across road spikes that were placed on the ground and tries to avoid them, but his two back tires get snagged. Benson then has to dodge huge boulders that come tumbling down towards them, and loses his two front tires, leaving them even more vulnerable to the elements. He screams that they're all going to die, but Mordecai assures him that he has an idea. He and Rigby climb into the golf cart and drive it off the bed of the truck after untying it. After dodging some boulders, they then tie the cart to the grill of Benson's truck and tell him to hang on. Leading the way, Mordecai and Rigby proceed to pull off the exact same moves they did at the beginning of the episode, jumping off an impromptu ramp, grinding on a strip of road that just so happens to resemble the makeshift steel beam from earlier, swerving through these inexplicable stalagmites, and donutting their way in and out of an even larger hole that Rick Sanchez apparently used his portal gun on. Having miraculously survived all of that, because of course they did, they finally drive off a cliff, landing back on the regular highway. Rigby points out that the dealership is only a few hundred yards away from them, and we see the employees there begin to close it. Mordecai drives the cart towards it as fast as he can, screeching to a stop just as he reaches the gate.
Hey, are you guys still open?
Let me guess, last day on the warranty?
Man, how cynical and jaded do you have to be to see people who are obviously in terrible shape and treat them like absolute garbage? Plus, how often do the people of this universe wait for the last day to redeem the warranty on their golf carts if this guy is able to guess exactly what they're here for just by seeing the golf cart? Well, anyways, the employees accept their order and our protagonists are driven away in an ambulance, with the episode ending on the following scene.
Well, Benson, at least we got the cart to the dealership.
Yeah, but the truck is totaled.
When does the warranty on the truck expire? Road trip!
Well, that was anticlimactic. Benson doesn't acknowledge any of the struggles they went through or that Mordecai and Rigby just saved his job. He just comments that his truck has been totaled and Mordecai and Rigby joke about going on another road trip to fix it. I mean, I guess the joke is kind of funny, but I was expecting something a little more subtle considering how heavy the episode was. Well, whatever. This episode is still awesome. Sure, some of the plot points in it don't make a ton of sense, and the melodrama can feel a tad forced at times, but when the emotional core of the story hits, man does it hit. Even without the scene in the arcade, this episode is still decent, in part thanks to the many good jokes sprinkled throughout it. But with that scene added in, Busted Cart is, in this reviewer's humble opinion, the best episode of Season 3, as well as the realest episode of Regular Show. I'm Alex the Critic, and I'll see you guys next time.